The Empire's message. The broadcast began with a cold mechanical hum as the Galactic Empire's insignia, an ornate crest of interlocking silver and crimson lines, filled every screen across human-controlled space. General Alexander Cain stood rigid in his office at Earth Defense Command, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the transmission that had forcibly overtaken every channel. The room around him slowly filled with officers, their faces illuminated by the harsh glow of the screens. None dared break the suffocating silence as the Empire's symbol faded, replaced by the towering figure of Emperor Taylor. The alien ruler's biomechanical armor gleamed under harsh lights, his elongated blue-skinned form and featureless black eyes radiating an aura of unrelenting menace. Behind him stood rows of Vicaren warriors, their own armor pulsing with an inner light that seemed to mock human technology. "This is a message from the High Council of the Galactic Empire to the people of Earth," Emperor Taylor's voice boomed, translated perfectly into English yet devoid of any emotion. The camera panned across a massive arena where thousands of humans knelt in chains, men, women, and children from Epsilon Prime, the colony that had dared to resist imperial rule. Cain's jaw clenched so tight it might shatter. He had fought the Vicarans before, had seen their brutality firsthand, but this was different. This wasn't war, it was genocide masquerading as justice. 70,000 of your kind, Emperor Taylor continued, his tone almost conversational, chose defiance over submission. They chose rebellion over order. This is the price of such choices. The execution began without ceremony. Massive platforms rose from the arena floor, each equipped with long rows of nooses. The humans were marched forward in orderly lines, their faces a mixture of terror and resignation. The Vicarans watched in silence, their expressionless faces betraying no hint of emotion. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, standing beside Cain, turned away as the first platform dropped. But Cain forced himself to watch, to remember every face. These were his people, his responsibility. He had failed them once, he would not fail them again. Group after group met the same fate, each execution clinical, efficient, and utterly devoid of mercy. When the last human had fallen, Emperor Taylor's face filled the screen once more. "Let this be a lesson," the alien ruler declared. "Humanity's place in the galaxy is not to question, but to obey. Rebellion will be met with annihilation. Submit, and you may yet survive." The broadcast ended abruptly, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, only the distant hum of machinery filled the silence. Then the room erupted in chaos, officers shouting, some calling for immediate retaliation, others for restraint. "Enough." Cain's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. 70,000 of our people were murdered today. Not soldiers. Not combatants. Families. Civilians. Children. He turned to face his officers, his steel-gray eyes burning with controlled fury. "The Empire thinks they can break us, that we'll cower and fall in line. They're wrong." Lieutenant Harper, a young officer barely in his 20s, stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, our forces are no match for theirs. The Empire's fleets outnumber us 100 to 1. Their technology is centuries ahead. If we retaliate, we've been outnumbered before," Cain cut him off. "We've faced impossible odds before. And every time, humanity has endured." He walked to the large window overlooking Earth's sprawling capital, his reflection staring back at him. "Today, the Empire reminded us what we're fighting for. They reminded us why we can't afford to lose." Admiral Ryan Carter entered the room, his pristine uniform a sharp contrast to the chaos around him. "The colonies are demanding action, General," he reported. "Mars, Titan, Europa, they're all mobilizing, with or without Earth's approval." Cain nodded slowly. "Then we give them direction. We give them purpose." He turned back to the room. "I want every ship we have ready for combat within 48 hours. Every pilot in a cockpit, every gun manned, every defense grid at full power. And what about Helios? Carter asked quietly, the name hanging in the air like a forbidden word. The room grew still. Helios, humanity's best-kept secret, a weapon developed in the shadows, hidden from the Empire's watchful eyes. Cain had overseen its development personally, knowing that one day, humanity would need every advantage it could get. Helios stays in reserve, Cain replied. For now. But I want it ready. When the time comes, we'll need it. The door slid open with a hiss, and Captain Elias Voss strode in, his flight jacket slung over one shoulder. Despite the gravity of the situation, a hint of a cocky grin played at the corners of his mouth. I heard we're finally taking the fight to those blue-skinned bastards, he said, earning a few nervous chuckles from the younger officers. Cain regarded him coolly. Captain Voss. I trust the Ghost Squadron is ready. Born ready, sir, Voss replied, his grin fading into something harder, more predatory. Just give us targets. You'll have them soon enough. Cain turned to address the entire room. The Empire thinks they're invincible. They think we're too weak, too divided to strike back. We're going to prove them wrong. We're going to show them what it means to cross humanity. He paused, letting his words sink in. This isn't about vengeance, he continued, his voice softer but no less intense. This is about survival. About justice. About showing the galaxy that humanity will not bow, will not break, will not go quietly into the night. The officers straightened, their earlier fear and confusion hardening into resolve. They had all seen the broadcast. They had all felt the same helpless rage. Now they had a leader willing to turn that rage into action. Prepare the fleet, Cain commanded. Notify all colonies and outposts. As of this moment, humanity is at war. As the officers dispersed to carry out his orders, Cain remained by the window. The sun was setting, casting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. It was a fitting backdrop, he thought, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could still fight its way through. In the quiet that followed, he allowed himself a single moment of vulnerability. We're coming for you, he whispered to the darkening sky. All of you. Behind him, Earth's last great war machine began to stir to life. In orbital shipyards, crews scrambled to ready vessels for combat. In hidden bases across the solar system, weapons that had lain dormant for years were brought online. And in the hearts of every human who had witnessed the broadcast, a fire began to burn, a fire that would either light humanity's way to victory or consume them all in its flames. The Empire had made their statement. Now it was humanity's turn to respond. The Ghost Squadron. Captain Elias Voss sat in the cockpit of his Wraith-class fighter, the hum of its quantum engines vibrating through his bones. Through the reinforced viewscreen, he watched as the rest of Ghost Squadron formed up around him, 12 of the deadliest pilots humanity had ever produced, flying the most advanced ships Earth could build. Ghost lead to all units, he transmitted, his voice steady despite the adrenaline already coursing through his veins. Final systems check. This is not a drill. One by one, his pilots reported in. Each voice carried the weight of what they were about to attempt, what General Cain had dubbed Operation First Strike. Ghost 2, all systems green, Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez responded, her fighter sliding into position on Voss's right wing. Maya was his second-in-command, a tactical genius who could outmaneuver any pilot in the fleet. Ghost 3, ready to dance, came the drawled response from James, Cowboy, Chen, the squadron's resident demolitions expert. His fighter bristled with experimental weapons, each designed to punch through Vicaren shields. The rest of the squadron chimed in, 12 voices united in purpose. They had trained together, fought together, bled together. Now they were about to attempt something no human force had ever achieved, a direct strike at the heart of Vicaren power. Their target was Station 9, a massive Imperial communications hub orbiting a gas giant in the Proxima system. Intelligence suggested it was lightly defended, relying on its secrecy rather than firepower for protection. More importantly, it contained the quantum relay network that coordinated Imperial fleet movements across this sector of space. "Remember the mission," Voss transmitted as they approached the jump point. "We get in, plant the package, and get out. Clean and quiet. The Empire doesn't know we're coming, and we want to keep it that way." The package was a virus, developed by Earth's best cyberneticists. Once uploaded into the Imperial network, it would create a blind spot in their detection systems, a corridor of darkness through which the main human fleet could advance undetected. "Jump in 3, 2, 1, mark." Space twisted around them as their quantum drives engaged. For a fraction of a second, reality itself seemed to bend, and then they were there, emerging in the shadow of a massive purple-tinged gas giant. Station 9 hung in orbit above them, its crystalline spires reaching out into space like frozen lightning. "No patrol ships," Maya reported, her sensors sweeping the area. "Minimal energy signatures. Looks like intel was right for once." "Don't get cocky," Voss warned. "Remember Epsilon Prime. The Empire likes to play with its food before eating it." They approached the station in perfect formation, their ship's stealth systems rendering them nearly invisible to conventional sensors. As they drew closer, Voss could make out more details of the alien architecture, the way the station seemed to pulse with an inner light, its surfaces shifting and flowing like liquid metal. "Ghost 3 to lead," Cowboy's voice crackled over the comm, "got something weird on my scopes. Energy signature I've never seen before." Before Voss could respond, space itself seemed to ripple. Where there had been empty void moments before, 3 Vicaren warships suddenly materialized, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with that same inner light as the station. "It's a trap," Maya shouted. "They knew we were coming." Voss's mind raced. The Empire had somehow anticipated their attack, had prepared an ambush. But how? The mission parameters had been known only to a select few. "Ghost Squadron, break and attack," he ordered, pushing his fighter into a desperate roll as energy beams lanced out from the Vicaren ships. "Maya, take 3 through 6 and proceed with the primary mission. The rest of us will keep them busy." "But sir." "That's an order, Lieutenant. The mission comes first. Always." Maya's fighter peeled away, leading half the squadron toward the station while Voss and the others engaged the warships. The space around them erupted into chaos as human and alien technology clashed. The Vicaren ships were larger, more powerful, their weapons capable of vaporizing a fighter with a single hit. But Ghost Squadron hadn't earned their reputation by playing fair. They were guerrilla fighters, striking from impossible angles, using the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere to mask their movements. "Ghost 8 is down," someone shouted as one of their fighters exploded, turned into a brief, brilliant star by Vicaren weapons fire. "Ghost 10, taking heavy damage," another voice cut off in static. Voss gritted his teeth as he threw his fighter into a series of maneuvers that strained both ship and pilot to their limits. He had lost people before, good pilots, friends. But this was different. This time, the fate of humanity itself might hang on their success or failure. "Maya, status," he demanded as he lined up a shot on one of the warship's sensor arrays. "We're at the insertion point," she reported, her voice tight with concentration. "But they've upgraded their cyber defenses. The virus isn't working. We need, wait." Her voice suddenly changed, excitement breaking through the tension. "Sir, I'm detecting a vulnerability. It's not much, but if we overload our quantum cores, you'll create a feedback pulse that could break through their firewalls," Voss finished. "But that's suicide, Lieutenant. The blast would destroy your ships." "The mission comes first," Maya quoted his own words back to him. "Always." Before he could respond, Maya's voice came again, addressing her wing of the squadron. "Ghosts 3 through 6, it's been an honor. For Earth." "Maya, wait." Four human fighters suddenly accelerated toward the station, their quantum cores burning bright enough to rival the gas giant's own luminescence. The Vicaren warships turned to intercept them, but it was too late. The explosion was beautiful in its terrible symmetry, a sphere of pure energy that expanded outward from where the fighters had been, washing over the station like a tsunami of light. When it cleared, the station's crystalline spires had turned dark, its systems overloaded by the quantum pulse. Energy spike. Cowboy reported. Their whole network is crashing. The virus, it's working. The crazy bastards did it. Voss allowed himself a moment of grief for Maya and the others, then focused on the task at hand. All remaining units, form up on me. We're going to make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. The surviving fighters regrouped, their formation ragged but determined. The Vicaren warships were still there, still deadly, but now they seemed to move more sluggishly, their coordinated attacks disrupted by the loss of the station's quantum network. Ghost lead to command, Voss transmitted on a heavily encrypted channel. Operation First Strike is a success. The corridor is open. But sir. He paused, thinking of Maya's last words. We paid for it in blood. General Cain's voice came back, clear despite the vast distance. Understood, Captain. Return to base. The main fleet is already moving into position. As Ghost Squadron limped home, Voss couldn't help but look back at where Station 9 hung in space, its once brilliant spires now dark and lifeless. They had struck the first real blow against the Empire, had proven that humanity could hurt them. But the Empire would retaliate. Of that, he had no doubt. And when they did, they would come with everything they had. The war that General Cain had promised was about to begin in earnest. And Ghost Squadron, what was left of it, would be on the front lines. For Maya, Voss whispered to himself as they jumped back to human space. For all of them. Behind them, Station 9's darkness spread through the Imperial network like a cancer, creating the shadow through which humanity's vengeance would soon follow. Helios rising. Admiral Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the EDS Prometheus, Earth's newest battleship, watching as the massive fleet assembled around Jupiter. The loss of Station 9 had thrown the Vicaren defense networks into chaos, creating the opportunity they needed. But that window wouldn't stay open forever. Status report, he commanded, his voice carrying across the hushed bridge. All ships report ready, Admiral, his XO, Commander Sarah Chen, responded. The Mars contingent has joined formation, and the Titan defense fleet is approaching from the outer system. Total force strength stands at 317 vessels. Carter nodded, though the number felt painfully small compared to what they would soon face. And Helios? The weapon is prepared, sir. General Cain's team completed the final calibrations an hour ago. They're standing by for your order. The Admiral's reflection stared back at him from the reinforced viewport, a man changed by years of war. His once pristine uniform now bore the subtle signs of constant wear, and his eyes carried the weight of too many hard decisions. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Begin Operation Daybreak. Throughout the assembled armada, engines flared to life. The fleet split into 3 battle groups, each led by a different commander. Carter would lead the main thrust, while Captain Voss's surviving Ghost Squadron fighters would scout ahead. The third group, commanded by Colonel Helena Martinez, would protect their secret weapon, Helios. As they approached the jump point, Carter received a priority transmission from Earth. General Cain's hologram appeared on the bridge, his expression grim. Admiral, we've decoded more of the data Ghost Squadron retrieved, Cain reported. The Empire wasn't just preparing for our attack. They've been planning something bigger. Much bigger. How much bigger? We've detected massive fleet movements throughout Imperial space. They're gathering ships, Admiral. More than we've ever seen. This isn't just about crushing a rebellion anymore. They mean to end us. Completely. Carter absorbed this news with outward calm, though his mind raced with implications. Then we strike first. Hit them before they're ready. Agreed. But Carter. Cain paused, his hologram flickering. If this goes wrong, if Helios fails, there won't be a second chance. Humanity ends today. It won't fail, Carter assured him. You built it. I'll deploy it. And the Empire will learn what happens when you push humanity too far. The hologram nodded once, then vanished. Carter turned to Commander Chen. Begin the jump sequence. All ships, battle stations. Space distorted around them as hundreds of quantum drives engaged simultaneously. The fleet emerged in Imperial space, deep in the shadow of a red dwarf star. Their target lay ahead, the Vicaren Third Fleet's primary staging area, where the Empire gathered the ships that would soon assault Earth. For a moment, everything was silent. Then alarms blared across the bridge. Multiple contacts. Chen reported. Vicaren signatures, thousands of them. They're already here. The void before them filled with Imperial warships, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with that characteristic inner light. They had arrived expecting to catch the enemy unprepared. Instead, they had jumped straight into an ambush. All ships, combat formation. Carter ordered, his training taking over. Launch fighters. Bring up defensive screens. The space between the fleets erupted with weapons fire. Vicaren energy beams lanced through the void, while human railguns responded with salvos of hypervelocity rounds. Ships on both sides began to die, their destruction silent in the vacuum of space. Sir, Chen called out, her voice tight. We're detecting something else. Something massive. A new shape emerged from behind the Vicaren fleet, a ship that dwarfed everything else in the battlefield. Its hull wasn't the usual crystalline architecture of Imperial vessels. This was something else, something ancient. The World Breaker, Carter whispered, recognizing the vessel from intelligence reports. The Empire's supreme weapon, thought to be merely a legend. Until now. Sir, they're powering up their main weapon. Chen reported. Energy readings are off the scale. Carter's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and now faced with a weapon of unimaginable power. But they had come too far to retreat. Colonel Martinez, he transmitted. Deploy Helios. Now. The third battle group's formation parted, revealing a device that seemed tiny compared to the World Breaker. But size didn't matter. What mattered was what lay within, the culmination of decades of human research into Imperial technology. Helios is powered, Martinez reported. But sir, at this range, the targeting solution isn't optimal. We need to get closer. Then we'll get you closer. Carter opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Carter. The Empire thought they could break us. They thought they could make us kneel. But they forgot something important about humans, we don't know how to quit. He paused, watching as the World Breaker's weapon began to glow with terrible purpose. Today, we show them why that matters. All ships, advance. Get Colonel Martinez to her firing position. Whatever it takes. The human fleet surged forward, ships fighting and dying to create a corridor through which Helios could reach its target. Ghost Squadron led the charge, their fighters weaving through Imperial formation with impossible skill. The World Breaker fired, its beam cutting through space like the wrath of an angry god. Ships caught in its path simply ceased to exist, transformed into their component atoms in an instant. But still they pressed on. Still they fought. Because they had to. Because humanity's future hung on this moment. Optimal range achieved. Martinez announced. Helios is ready. Fire, Carter commanded, his voice deadly calm. The device activated, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself began to scream. Helios wasn't just a weapon, it was humanity's understanding of how reality worked, turned into a key that could unlock the fundamental forces of the universe. Where its influence spread, the laws of physics began to unravel. The Vicaren ships closest to the effect simply disappeared, their atomic bonds dissolving as spacetime rejected their very existence. The effect spread, a wave of unreality that consumed everything in its path. The World Breaker tried to retreat, its massive engines flaring. But it was too late. The wave reached it, and the mighty vessel began to break apart, not into pieces, but into possibility, into quantum uncertainty made manifest. By all the gods, Chen whispered, watching the destruction unfold. What have we done? What we had to, Carter replied. Signal all ships. Emergency jump. Get us out of here before the effect spreads further. As the human fleet retreated, leaving behind a graveyard of Imperial ships and a wound in the fabric of spacetime itself, Carter couldn't help but wonder if they had just saved humanity, or damned it by unleashing something they couldn't control. But those were questions for another day. Today, they had struck a blow that the Empire would never forget. Today, they had shown the galaxy that humanity would not go quietly into the night. The war wasn't over. But for the first time since the execution of those 70,000 souls, humanity had hope. And sometimes, hope was the deadliest weapon of all. The price of victory. The dimensional tear where the World Breaker had been destroyed grew larger with each passing day. General Alexander Cain watched the sensor readings from Earth Defense Command, his expression unreadable as the holographic display showed the expanding anomaly. The rift is consuming everything in its path, Dr. Elena Santos, Earth's leading quantum physicist, explained. Her dark eyes were rimmed with exhaustion after days of non-stop analysis. Stars, planets, even the fabric of spacetime itself. Helios didn't just destroy the Imperial fleet, it created a wound in reality. Can it be contained? Cain asked, though he already suspected the answer. Theoretically. Yes. Practically. She shook her head. We'd need technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. The Empire might have been able to do it, but they had destroyed the Empire's greatest technological achievement along with their fleet. The irony wasn't lost on Cain. A priority alert flashed across the command screens. Captain Voss's face appeared, his usual cockiness replaced by urgent concern. General, we've got movement across all sectors. The remaining Imperial forces, they're not retreating. They're advancing. All of them. Tactical displays updated, showing vast fleets of Vicaren ships moving with clear purpose. Not toward Earth, but toward the rift. They're going to try to seal it, Admiral Carter's voice joined the transmission. They know something we don't. Dr. Santos's eyes widened as she studied the Imperial fleet movements. Of course, the World Breaker wasn't just a weapon. It was a containment vessel. The Empire has been holding something back, something they're terrified of. As if in response to her words, new alarms blared. The rift's energy signature had changed, its swirling darkness now shot through with patterns of impossible light. We're detecting movement within the anomaly, a sensor operator reported, his voice shaking. Something's coming through. The first entity emerged from the rift like oil flowing through water, a mass of shifting darkness that seemed to devour light itself. More followed, each one larger than the last, their forms defying description in human terms. The Precursors, Dr. Santos whispered. The race that came before the Empire, before everything. The beings they've been containing for millennia. Ancient creatures of unimaginable power, released from their prison by humanity's desperate gambit for victory. The Empire hadn't been humanity's jailers, they had been the guardians of reality itself. Cain watched as the Vicaren fleets engaged the emerging horrors, their weapons seemingly useless against beings that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Ships were torn apart not by weapons, but by the mere presence of these entities. General, Carter transmitted, the Empire is broadcasting on all frequencies. there, requesting our help. For a moment, Cain said nothing. The weight of 70,000 murdered humans still pressed on his conscience. But now he understood the true cost of vengeance, and it was far higher than anyone had imagined. Transmit to all human forces, he finally ordered. We stand with the Empire against the Precursors. Better the devil we know than the ones we just unleashed. The next hours were chaos as human and Vicaren forces coordinated for the first time in history. The enemy of their enemy had become their only hope for survival. Ghost Squadron flew alongside Imperial fighters, their combined efforts barely slowing the Precursor advance. The Prometheus joined with Vicaren cruisers to form battle lines against entities that cared nothing for the tactics of corporeal beings. Their targeting populated systems, Carter reported as another colony world went dark. Not just human or Imperial, they're systematically eliminating all life in their path. Dr. Santos worked frantically with Imperial scientists, sharing data and theories across the language barrier. The rift is their beachhead, she explained. If we can seal it, we might be able to contain them again. But we'd need. The Worldbreaker's core, an Imperial scientist finished in accented English. Its quantum matrix was designed to maintain dimensional barriers. Without it. Then we build another one, Cain decided. Human and Imperial technology, working together. How long? Weeks, at best, Dr. Santos replied. And we'd need resources we don't have, knowledge we've never. She was interrupted by new alerts. The Precursors had changed direction. They were heading for Earth. Not weeks, Cain stated. Days. We do it in days, or we don't do it at all. The next 72 hours tested the limits of both species. Imperial bioengineers worked alongside human quantum physicists, combining technologies that had never been meant to interact. Captain Voss led daring raids to gather exotic materials from the edges of Precursor-controlled space, losing ships and pilots with each mission. The new device took shape in orbit around Mars, an ugly hybrid of crystalline Imperial tech and human industrial engineering. Not elegant like the Worldbreaker, but they hoped it would be enough. They fired it just as the first Precursor entities reached the orbit of Jupiter. The device's beam struck the heart of the rift, and for a moment, reality held its breath. The rift began to close, slowly at first, then faster. The Precursors fought against the effect, their impossible forms twisting as they tried to maintain their foothold in normal space. It's working, Dr. Santos reported, her voice thick with exhaustion and hope. The dimensional barriers are stabilizing. But victory, as always, came with a price. The hybrid device was overloading, its human and Imperial components fighting against each other as they channeled powers they were never meant to contain. We need more power, the Imperial scientist announced. The containment field is failing. Cain made the decision without hesitation. Divert power from the planetary defense grid. Everything we've got. Sir, Carter protested, that would leave Earth completely exposed. Earth is already exposed, Cain responded. We either seal that rift, or nothing else matters. Cities went dark across the planet as every watt of power was channeled into the device. The barrier between dimensions strengthened, pushing back against the Precursor invasion. In a final burst of light that outshone the sun itself, the rift sealed. The hybrid device exploded, scattered across half the solar system. But it had done its job. The Precursors were gone. The rift was closed. And humanity found itself staring across space at their former enemies, both species changed by what they had witnessed. We should have told you, the Imperial commander transmitted on an open channel. About what we were containing. About why we needed order above all else. And we should have asked, Cain responded, before we broke something we didn't understand. The war that had begun with an execution would end not in victory or defeat, but in understanding. The Empire had been cruel, yes, but not without reason. And humanity had been right to fight back, but wrong about what they were truly fighting against. As the sun rose over a darkened earth, General Alexander Cain looked to the stars and wondered what would come next. The precursors were contained, but not defeated. The Empire was weakened, but not destroyed. And humanity had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that sometimes the real enemy isn't the one you're fighting, but the one you release in your desperation to win. The future was uncertain. But for the first time, humans and Vicarans would face it together. Whether they wanted to or not. A new dawn. 1 year after the Precursor incident, the great hall of the newly constructed Unity Station hummed with tension. General Alexander Cain stood before the assembled delegates, human and Vicaren alike, preparing to sign the Concordat that would reshape galactic civilization. Emperor Taylor, now more an equal than an overlord, towered beside him. The Vicaren leader's biomechanical armor had been modified to appear less threatening, though his black eyes remained as inscrutable as ever. "The terms are acceptable," Taylor announced, his translated voice carrying a new note of respect. "The Empire will share its containment technology. Humanity will contribute its adaptive thinking and innovation. Together, we prepare for their return." For they would return, everyone in the hall knew this truth. The precursors had been contained, not destroyed. The dimensional barriers were holding, but they wouldn't hold forever. Captain Voss, newly promoted to commander of the Joint Human-Vicaren Defense Force, stepped forward with Dr. Elena Santos. Together, they had spearheaded the integration of the two species' technologies. "The new detection grid is online," Santos reported. "We can now monitor dimensional stability across 3 sectors. The hybrid ships are performing beyond expectations. These vessels, combining imperial biotech with human quantum engineering, represented the future, elegant crystalline hulls housing cores of raw human ingenuity. Ghost Squadron had been the first to pilot them, proving that humans could interface with Vicaren systems. Admiral Carter, watching from his command chair on the Prometheus II, allowed himself a small smile. The ship's crew was now mixed, human officers working alongside Vicaren specialists. What had seemed impossible a year ago had become routine. "We've identified 3 potential incursion points," Carter transmitted. "The joint fleet stands ready." The Concordat wasn't just about military cooperation. It represented a fundamental shift in how both species viewed their place in the cosmos. The Empire's rigid hierarchy was being tempered by human adaptability, while humanity's chaos was being channeled by imperial discipline. "The 70,000, Cain began, addressing the assembly, will not be forgotten. Their memorial will stand as a reminder of what happens when fear and pride override wisdom. But their deaths also led us here, to an understanding that may save not just our species, but all life in this galaxy." Emperor Taylor inclined his head. "We were wrong to think order could be imposed through force alone. The precursors taught us that lesson eons ago, yet we failed to truly learn it. Perhaps that was why we feared humanity's potential so much. You reminded us of ourselves, before we became their jailers." The signing ceremony proceeded with the gravity it deserved. Human and Vicaren representatives took turns placing their marks on the document, physical and digital signatures binding their species together. Lieutenant Harper, the young officer who had once doubted their chances against the Empire, now commanded his own hybrid vessel. "Ghost Squadron reports all quiet along the dimensional boundary," he transmitted. "The new sensors are working perfectly." But the peace was fragile, built on the foundation of a shared enemy. Both species knew that old hatreds could resurface, that the weight of history couldn't be erased by a single document. "We'll be tested," Cain told his officers later, in the privacy of his quarters. "Not just by the precursors, but by ourselves. Change never comes easily." Dr. Santos nodded, her hands moving over the holographic display of their latest project, a combination of imperial containment tech and human theoretical physics that might, just might, provide a more permanent solution to the precursor threat. "But we're ready for it," she replied. "Both species have evolved. The Empire learned flexibility, we learned patience. Together, we're stronger than either of us could have been alone. The future remained uncertain. The dimensional barriers would need constant monitoring. The hybrid fleet would need to grow, to prepare for the day when the precursors found another way through. And both species would need to navigate their new relationship, balancing cooperation with independence. But as Cain looked out at the assembled fleet, imperial crystalline ships floating alongside human steel hulls, hybrid vessels bridging the gap between them, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before the execution broadcast: hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for something greater. Hope that from the ashes of war and the crucible of crisis, something new and better could emerge. The memorial to the 70,000 stood on Unity Station, a reminder of where they had begun. But it was no longer just a monument to tragedy. It had become a foundation for the future, a future where humanity and the Empire stood together against the darkness between dimensions. For those we lost, Cain whispered, touching the memorial's surface. And for those yet to come. Above him, the hybrid fleet prepared for another patrol of the dimensional boundaries. Within Unity Station, human and Vicaren scientists worked side by side on new defenses. And in the vast darkness of space, reality itself held steady, watched over by those who had learned, at terrible cost, the true meaning of unity. The war that had begun with an execution had ended with an alliance. The vengeance that had driven them had been transformed into something greater. And though the galaxy's greatest threat still lurked beyond the dimensional barriers, they would face it as one. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected. But perhaps it was the one they had needed all along.